Welcome to the POG Show. I'm your host, Christine Martindale, Public Information Officer for the City of Port Orange, a city in Central Florida that is unique by choice, not by chance. I will be bringing you powerful interviews and on-the-go info to gain a better understanding of the various services and functions our city provides. So let's get started. Hello, everyone, to episode 24 of the POG Show. Today I have with me in the podcast studio Duhl, Community Development Engineer, and Johnnie, Yongue, Civil Engineer from the city's Community Development Department. Today we are talking about a variety of topics relating to flooding and stormwater prevention and pollution. But before we get into the topic, I just have to say, I can't believe it. We are hitting our 2-year anniversary of this POG Show, and I'm very proud of it, and it's been just so much fun to interviewing just a variety of guests on this show, so our listeners and our residents of Port Orange can really learn more about our city and what we're all about. So 2 years to the POG Show. So hi, Val and Johnnie. Thank you both for taking your time with me today.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yeah. So we'll talk with Johnnie in just a few minutes. But Val, maybe if you want to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how long you've been with the city.
Okay. I am a Florida native. I grew up in Ormond Beach, and I actually went to school here in Spruce Creek. I graduated in 1994, so it's been a few years from the International Baccalaureate program. And then I went up to North Carolina, Davidson College, and then got my master's at USF in engineering, and then ultimately an MBA at UF. So I've been around, but I came back home once I had children, and I'm really thankful that I get to work where I grew up, and I've enjoyed working at Port Orange. I've been here since 2018.
Okay. Wow, you're a native, so that's awesome. I've interviewed a lot of people who have been natives of Port Orange, and I've been here 7 years, and I call it home almost myself. So, well, welcome, and thank you for spending a few minutes with me. So since, we are at the peak of hurricane season, I know as we talk, there is a storm that's brewing here. This is probably the best time to talk about this and what the city is doing to prepare for a storm event.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that the city does all year round. The Public Works Department's very good at cleaning out ditches and swales. They clean out the pond systems. And so there are culverts and inlets that connect the city's stormwater system. They inspect them, and if they see sediment at the bottom of them, they clean them out. There is a whole chart, and they're on a schedule to get cleaned. That's managed by Public Works. And then also homeowners associations should be cleaning out their stormwater systems the same as the city, maintaining the volume level in the pond system to make sure that they're not overfilling if there is a large storm event, and that their pipes are also clean and do not have a lot of debris, trash, leave sediment in them. So HOAs should be doing that on an annual basis. And there's also things that property owners can do to prepare. One of the things we see often before a large storm is there's a lot of tree branches on the road, and then we send out posts on social media asking people to not have tree branches in the inlets because it can clog them. So if a tree branch is in an inlet, it can cause flooding. And as the leaves fall off during the rainstorm, it gets into the pipes and it can cause flooding. So we ask that if you're going to be trimming branches to protect your roof, to do it so that you have enough time for Waste Pro to come and pick up the landscape debris in advance of a storm. So the branches don't become missiles, and that the leaves don't get into the stormwater system. And another thing property owners can do is look at a website. It's relatively new. It's called reducefloodrisk.org, and it's a website put out by the Association of State Floodplain Managers. And basically, you enter some data about your property, what type of structure it is, and then they give you strategies for how to reduce your flood risk. And on that website, there's some data, and it says that there has been $1 billion worth of flood losses per year, every year since 1990 in the United States. And so when I was looking up that data this morning, I thought that was a lot and should be reported. And that they report for every $1 invested in flood mitigation, $6 are saved in post-disaster recovery costs. So $1 spent now saves $6 in the case there is a disaster and the cost to recover from all the damage. And FEMA also has data that says that 1 inch of water in a residence can cause $25,000 in costs. And that's something I believe just based on renovating my own house. So if you think about the cost of replacing flooring and walls and door frames and bottom cabinets, baseboards, and more, you can see how that can add up. But the first thing that people need to understand is their flood risk.
Yeah, all good points for sure. So how does a person check their flood risk?
So the city has a flood map. It's available on their website at port-orange.org. And you can see what your flood zone is. And the map isn't created by the city. It's a FEMA map, and it's just the layers from the FEMA map are on our GIS system. And so you type in your address into a search bar, and there's a legend that explains what the different color shades mean. And after you see what color shade your property is and you see what that means, then you will know what your flood chance is. So most of the properties in Port Orange are flood zone X, and that means that they have no flood risk in a 100-year storm. There's a lot of properties that are shaded X zone, which means it's a 0.2% chance of flood risk, and that would be also equivalent. Some people call it a 1 in 500-year flood storm event. And there are about 5,500 properties in Port Orange that have a 1% annual chance flood risk. And that's an AE zone, AH, A zone. Those zones have a 1% chance, which is colloquially called 1 in 100-year flood risk.
So what? Oh, yeah, I was going to say, so 1% is pretty rare.
Yeah, so it's pretty rare, and something that property owners, when they're at the counter and they're trying to come in for building permits, they say, I've never seen flooding on my property, and I've lived here for 20 years, so I shouldn't need to follow the floodplain regulations. And even if a person hasn't seen flooding, the flood risk that we're regulating to is the 1% chance. So it is very rare, and you may not have been there the whole 100 years in that property.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. So with disaster assistance after a major event is important to all citizens.
Yes. So the disaster assistance applies to everybody who's in the floodplain, but everybody else who isn't in the floodplain. And disaster assistance is only available once a president declares a major disaster, and it also makes the city eligible for grants. We are participating in the National Flood Insurance Program, which allows us to participate in grants and the federal disaster assistance after a major disaster.
So here's a question. So how does everyone in Port Orange require flood insurance?
So not everyone requires flood insurance. There's about 5,500 properties in Port Orange in the floodplain. And if you have a mortgage, then often you are required by the mortgage company to insure your property against the flood risk. But we have a lot of property owners in Port Orange that don't have mortgages, and so they're not required to get flood insurance. But we do have data that the value of the 5,000 properties in Port Orange in the floodplain, they had a 2019 value of about $500 million, $500 million. So that's a lot of value in the floodplain for structures. And I also have data that FEMA has for Port Orange that if there was a Category 5 storm, there is a risk to almost 13,000 buildings and condos in Port Orange in case of a Category 5 storm. And those properties are worth $2 billion. So if there's a storm, that's a lot of properties at risk here.
Yeah, that would be devastating.
Yeah, that's why we spend a lot of our time in community development, pushing people to attain flood insurance and follow the floodplain management regulations.
So out of the 5,000 properties in Port Orange in the floodplain, do you know how many have flood insurance?
Right now, there are about 2,500 active policies as of April 2022. So about half of the properties have flood insurance protection. And in Florida, the State Office of Floodplain Management recommends everyone in Florida attains flood insurance, even if you're in the center of the state in Orlando, because floods can happen everywhere. And sometimes floods aren't even caused by rain events, but maybe a broken plumbing system. So we recommend that even if you're not in the floodplain, to look into flood insurance and see what those costs are. And you can get the cost from your insurance agent that provides your homeowners or renters insurance.
You know, I didn't even know renters could get flood insurance. You know, I was a renter many, many years ago, and I guess I didn't think about it back then, but it's very true, right?
Yeah, so renters can protect the belongings inside their property from flood damage. And another thing that's I think is interesting is that not every buddy in America can even get the federally backed NFIP flood insurance. The city of Port Orange has met certain criteria, and we do certain specific things so that we can participate in the National Flood Insurance Program.
Can you tell us a little bit about the city, what the city does to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program?
Yes. The National Flood Insurance Program is abbreviated the NFIP. And NFIP participating communities have quid pro quo responsibilities to be eligible. And I can list them. We adopt and enforce the flood maps that FEMA has. And we have a flood damage prevention ordinance. We require permits for all types of development in the floodplain. We assure building sites or construction sites are reasonably safe from flooding. We require new and substantially improved homes and manufactured homes to be elevated above the base flood elevation where there's living. Require non-residential buildings to be elevated above the BFE or be dry flood-proofed. And determine if damaged buildings are substantially damaged. We conduct field inspections, cite and remedy violations. We work with code enforcement often, and we require and maintain surveyed elevation information like elevation certificates to document compliance with the flood damage ordinance. And all of those elevation certificates are held in perpetuity. So if you ever need one, you can check with us to see if we have one in our files. And then we also have to advise and work with FEMA when updates are required to the flood maps, if the stormwater system is changing, and maintain records and review and respond to periodic requests for reports by FEMA and the State Office of Floodplain Management. That's basically our responsibilities for participating in FIP.
That's a lot. That's a lot. So what do citizens really get for the city participating in this program, other than disaster relief and the ability to purchase federally backed flood insurance policies?
The city also participates in the NFIP's community rating system that not every community who has an FIP does. So this provides discounts for full rate flood insurance policies, and those discounts are automatically provided by the insurance providers. The city is a Class 5 CRS community, so the discount is 25% from the full risk rates.
Well, that's significant.
Yes, it is. And we in community development work hard at it all year long. There's a lot of documentation required, and we have annual audits, and every 3 years we have an in-depth audit.
Yeah, so what are some of the things that you have to do?
To maintain the Class 5 CRS level, the city provides all elevation certificates that it has processed from permits the previous year to FEMA, and we have to have an accuracy level of at least 90% for the elevation certificates. And I'm proud to report that for the past couple of years, we've had an accuracy level of 100%, which is very
Yay,
good.
Congrats.
Thank you. And we've worked hard with our surveyors to make sure that the products they're providing are accurate.
So is that all then?
No. Every year we also document how we're continuing to comply with the floodplain regulations for that year, or if we had any code changes. And every 3 years we have a deeper verification visit in person, and the documentation required for that audit is much more extensive. If we are found not to be compliant, like if our elevation certificate accuracy was less than 90%, then we may be retrograded down to a Class 10 community, and then we wouldn't be able to participate in the CRS and obtain flood insurance premium discounts of the 25%.
So do you know if losing the discounts would be a big loss to the citizens?
The data we have from FEMA is that the discounts are worth more than $140,000 in premium costs.
That's a lot of money remaining in people's pockets, right?
Yeah, it is. And it's important to remember that the city participates in these programs not only to protect the insurability of the homes, but to improve the city's ability to recover from a flooding event. A city built to sustain the effects of a flooding event can recover faster and be more of an asset to neighboring towns instead of being dependent on outside resources. In addition, city staff have an obligation to capture and record data following a flooding event, which is essential to understanding future risks and to establish necessary improvements.
It's a lot. Do you have anything else that you'd like to discuss?
Well, yeah, I wanted to talk about how we were just audited by the Florida Office of Floodplain Management. They go around the whole state. And a few months back, they were in Volusia and looked at the floodplains in all of the local cities, and Volusia County itself too. And we're actually wrapping up providing documentation required to them today. They found 5 properties in the city they wanted more information about because what they saw, it didn't look compliant with floodplain management regulations, so they were flagged. One was an accessory building where it looked like it could be used for living, recreation, or work, and it was low, so it was clear that it was below the floodplain elevation. And if a structure is below the floodplain elevation, called the base flood elevation, it can only be used for parking, storage, and egress to a second floor.
So you can't use it for a car repair shop or like a hangout area?
No. If it's not elevated 1 foot above the base flood elevation, then it shouldn't be used for anything except for parking, storage, or egress.
Interesting. So what happened with that property?
So we worked with the owner and obtained photos showing the inside of the property and gave them to the Office of Floodplain Management. And you can clearly see that it's being used for storage. So that was good, and they didn't have any other issues with it, so they closed that case.
Do you have any others to talk about?
Yeah,
like that?
So they also saw a dumpster at a property that looked old. The structure looked old and it was low. It was close to the river, and it looked like they were renovating that house. And so that property got flagged too. And the reason why it got flagged is because if a structure is in the floodplain, then special rules apply, and you can't just go in and freshen up or improve a structure without going to the city and attaining a floodplain development permit. A lot of people buy older houses and then they want to update it, or there's a lot of people who want to do some freshening up and flip it. But we need to evaluate if the work is going to be substantial, which is more than 50% of a structure's value is considered to be substantial. So a lot of the homes that are being bought, they might have a high cost. They might be $500,000, but if they're close to the river, then the the land might be worth $350,000 and the structure $150,000. So the structure itself doesn't have a lot of value. And what we have to do is we have to look at the structure's value and we divide the structure's value in half. So if it was a $150,000 house and it was 50% of that would be $75,000. And so the amount of improvements that could be put into that house would be only $75,000 before it would be a substantial improvement. And if there is a substantial improvement, then it needs to be brought up to current floodplain regulations, which means it should be 1 foot above the base flood elevation. And all of the mechanical, electric, and plumbing systems need to be 1 foot above too. So things like air conditioning condensers, water heaters, generators, all need to be raised 1 foot above base flood elevation and stands in brackets.
So does anyone doing renovations and they're in a floodplain have to get a permit?
Yes. So even if they're not moving plumbing or electrical or doing structural work, even if it's not regulated by the Florida Building Code, they still need to come in and get a floodplain development permit if you're in the floodplain and doing work on the house. And it should be brought to us in community development so we can work with the homeowner to determine how much value can be added into the house before it would trip the FEMA 50% rule and need to be elevated. And I think that's also something important for realtors and sellers to tell their buyers too, because a lot of buyers, they might come from up north, they don't understand things related to floodplain, and there's more conditions for structures in the floodplain, and buyers need to be aware of that.
Sure. And, this is a lot of information that I was not aware of either. So it's really, really good stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, we're part of a community, and we're all doing our part to protect our structures and our neighbors' structures' values. And after a flood happens, the process to recover and rebuild can be more expensive when limited resources are overburdened by a higher volume of damages and loss. It is the effort of the substantial improvement process to avoid these impacts by requiring improvements to elevate the structure above the potential flood elevation, protecting residents inside and their belongings. And by following the steps of the substantial improvement process, residents can avoid the costly effects of flood damage by including the costs of protecting their home and their investment.
I saw on obviously seeing on the news, we're maybe seeing a lot of rain over the next week.
Yeah, I saw this morning on the news there's going to be a tropical depression and possible hurricane next week. It looks like there may be 4 inches of rain next Wednesday. And that amount of rain will probably cause some flooding on roads in Port Orange. And there will be water stored in side yard swales that will percolate into the ground over a 72-hour period because that's how they're designed.
Yeah, good information and good to know. So in concluding, would you say that even though FEMA set the standards, it seems like it is really the city's responsibility to regulate and enforce these rules?
Yes, even though it is a national program, it is the city's responsibility to administer the program locally under state and federal guidance.
Yeah. Well, a lot of stuff, and I know there is a lot of planning that goes into a storm event. But really, what is the city doing about flooding that is not storm related? And now we're going to switch gears a little bit, and Johnnie is going to answer some of these questions.
Hi, yeah, thanks for having me on here today as well. I want to give before we move on, I want to give special credit to the fact that Val can not only handle all that, but she can also pronounce words like perpetuity. That takes a lot of training.
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, I'm Johnnie Yongue. I'm a project manager and a civil engineer with the city of Port Orange. And one of the things that I help coordinate with the city is how the city controls our national pollutant discharge elimination system, which we have as a permit with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection to operate the city's own stormwater system. And the city's responsibility here is really twofold for how we operate the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or the acronym for it is NPDES, where we have a responsibility to regulate water being discharged into the system, our system that is city controlled, that ultimately leads to the Halifax River. But then we also have a responsibility to make sure that there's no illegal connections. We have an enforcement requirement that goes beyond just permits. It's the city's legal authority provided by our NPDES permit to carry out inspections, surveillance, and enforcement procedures to enforce compliance either with a permit or in a case of any kind of an illegal discharge that you might see through development, to make sure that we don't have any negative impacts into our system or anyone else downstream, through any kind of contamination.
Yeah. So good stuff. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things we have seen that is an illicit connection or discharges that you just mentioned.
The illicit connections and discharges can be fairly broad. Some of them can be as little as just pumping water or dewatering into the street gutter from working on your property, pumping out a pool, HVAC system condensate lines even, pool drains, discharging chlorinated water into the stormwater systems and or any kind of water bodies like detention ponds, etc. Leaky septic tanks, leaking or flooded lift stations, and even washing out of various items like car washing, concrete from wheelbarrows, paint buckets, pesticides, herbicides, and mop buckets all have contamination in them that shouldn't be going into the city's stormwater system. So basically, nothing other than rainwater really should be going into the city's stormwater system.
Mm-hmm. But what does the city do about trash and dirt in the road from construction sites?
Well, the city has a permit authority here as well, where we're from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. We have a construction general permit that the city requires, where the DEP doesn't require their permit until impacts exceed more than an acre. But the city's requirement is more stringent than that and requires between a half acre to an acre any applicant to seek that permit as well in order to provide an erosion control plan. And it's my responsibility to coordinate a civil erosion control regulations and inspect for compliance on commercial and residential construction sites. So if you've ever seen anything like dirt in the road or what looks like a lack of compliance with erosion control requirements, feel free to contact me in the engineering department. Our contact information is located on the city's website, port-orange.org. So you can email or call us and let us know when you see noncompliance, whether that be on a construction site or in general where sediment or debris might be tracking on a road and going down the city's stormwater system so that we can enforce it. And that even though for work adjacent to any water body, no matter how small, even when people are just doing something as little as putting a pool in their backyard, the city goes as far as to require sediment and erosion control barriers such as silt fence or filter fabric, inlet protection really, and the storm drains to make sure that this material, even if it does get in the road as a part of the process of work, it's not going into our system and causing negative impacts later on. There are a lot, like Val said earlier, there are a lot of ponds and systems in the city that the city has an easement for, but they're not owned by the city. They're really maintained by the homeowners associations, and they need to be inspecting and maintaining their stormwater systems and ponds to make sure that they're still percolating and to repair any kind of control structures that might be discharging water from the pond into the city's stormwater system to make sure that it's performing as designed. Because we need to control how the water is going into our system and ultimately into receiving water bodies like Spruce Creek, Rose Bay, and the Halifax River to make sure that we're neither overburdening these systems or providing such little water that it negatively impacts them where they could be depending on these water sources that were originally natural. Some things people can do to prevent pollution in ponds, ditches, and water bodies is to not fertilize and add pesticide within 10 feet of a water body, and to not allow grass clippings to go into the water body. Unfortunately, when organic matter like grass clippings degrades, it lowers oxygen levels in the water bodies and causes problems for aquatic organisms like fish, shellfish, and aquatic life that are essential to the water body's ecosystem.
Yeah, very, very true. And we talk about that all the time. In fact, even on our social media, we try to educate the public on this. But, we should talk about trash in general.
Yeah, trash from your yard or road litter can be washed down storm drains and entangle animals or through ingestion, which is more common, can damage digestive tracts, causing starvation and malnutrition, reducing the animal's ability to regulate its buoyancy in the water. It's important to pick up trash before you mow your lawn and not litter. We appreciate everyone that participated in the International Coastal Cleanup Day last weekend.
Yes, and while you're talking about that, we every year there is an International Coastal Cleanup, and last weekend on the 17th of September, it was advertised on our social media, and we participated with the county, and there were 2 Port Orange sites that participated: Bushman Park and Causeway Park, and I was the site captain for Bushman Park, where we had a variety of people that came and helped clean up just the park itself, and they really did a great job. And it was great because you can either pick it up and mark everything manually, or now they have the county has an app where it was called, actually it wasn't the county's app, but it's called the Clean Swell app, and where people could actually download the app, people can record what they picked up and how much. And then this data and any other data entered in this Clean Swell app when recorded is reported right to the FDEP on an annual basis, and then how much trash is picked up. So it's really a cool app. I'm so glad that they initiated something like that, and it was made my job easier as a site captain last week. I'll tell you that. But I think it's a great system where you can actually get the data very, very quickly.
How is it that people know when the next International Coastal Cleanup is going to be?
Well, actually, like the Volusia County, they have an environmental department, and they let me know when the next cleanup is. But this international cleanup is once a year. It's usually in September, and I can make sure that we notify our residents when everything is.
Good to know. I would like to be on that list.
Absolutely.
And something else that people probably know, but it's important to bring up, is to make sure that people are picking up pet waste. Pet waste is a health risk to wildlife, other pets, and people, especially children. Pet waste is full of bacteria that can make animals and other people sick, so it's best to dispose of pet waste in the toilet for treatment by the sewage treatment plant or your septic system. And if you don't do that, the next best alternative is to seal the pet waste in a plastic bag and throw it in the garbage. So we want to thank everybody for trying to help keep our waterways clean. Everyone's help really makes a difference. And while we're talking about the city's stormwater system, it's important to know that the city is required to regulate discharges from private properties into the city's municipal separate stormwater system, MS4. This is done as a part of the permit process where the city reviews plans for new construction and developments to ensure that developed sites are being engineered to minimize impact so that runoff from the site simulates the flow from stormwater into a natural area into the stormwater system. Failure to account for new paved areas where there was once wetland leads to backing up storm drains and overburdened piping, which needs more maintenance and can cause problems downstreams, washing out, polluting ponds and rivers, which can damage the city's natural resources. This is similar to how the city has to treat development in the floodplain, where it's not just the city's responsibility to prevent construction where it can lead to damage, but prevent those improvements from causing damage to others, such as neighbors or downstream users.
Yeah, very true. I know we covered a lot, and this is one of my longer episodes, but I think all this information is really, really good. And I know for those listening, may want to replay this episode again, because I know I know I want to do that myself. I learned a ton, and being a resident and a homeowner in Port Orange, this is really good stuff. And I know I asked Val where she was from, so I never asked you, Johnnie. Where did you grow up?
Well, I'm a Floridian as well. I moved to Port Orange in 2021, so I'm a relatively recent transplant, but I'm from Key West. So,
Wow, okay.
A little different. Definitely happy to be in Port Orange. Yeah, my wife is from here, so that's kind of why we relocated to here, and I've really just been enjoying living here. We're definitely beach people. Maybe one day there's a boat in the future. We'll see. But no, we're happy to be in Florida. Happy to be here, part of the city of Port Orange family. It's been a blast, and I've been learning a lot from Val.
Awesome.
We're both engineers, so
Great. Awesome.
Oh, yep. And we even have a little one on the way.
Oh, congratulations.
So, yeah, there's going to be another Port Orange resident.
There
in the
we
future
go.
that
We'll just
need
add
to
another
make sure
one
we
to the tally.
Protect from that floodplain. Yeah.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank
Well,
you.
again, both Val and Johnny, thank you so much. I know it was a lot of information, but a lot of good details. And I know this is very valuable stuff. So thank you. But of course, before we conclude, I need to make sure I talk about Alert Port Orange, especially now. Alert Port Orange is an emergency notification system that allows you to receive communication from the city through a phone call, text message, or email based on your preferences. The system will be used to notify you about weather alerts, public safety notifications, health notifications, and more. Of course, I'll make sure the link is in the show notes of this episode. So again, Val and Johnny, thank you so much. And of course, the best ways to find the city is by the city's website, www.port-orange.org, the city's Facebook page, Port Orange City Hall, our Twitter page @City Port Orange, and our LinkedIn page, City of Port Orange. This podcast, The POG Show, can be found on iTunes, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Well, this wraps up episode 24 of The POG Show. Until next time. Thank you so much for spending time with me today on The POG Show. We've only just begun, and with you sharing, subscribing, and leaving a 5-star review for this podcast is really going to help launch us to the next level together.